This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. This is episode number 40, and my guest today is my good friend Jim Ryan. As we'll get into in the conversation, Jim and I met some years ago, and our friendship developed in a way that I wasn't expecting. It's a different type of friend than I thought I'd ever meet, and another indication of how my previous thinking might have been wrong. Jim and I discuss some of our travels together. He shares a couple fun stories from his life, and we get into what he's learned after a recent injury and not being able to get around so easy as he once did, and what that means for his mortality. Plus, as always, the being wrong segment, as Jim shares how he might have done some things differently in the past. This episode is audio only. Some of the recent ones had video, as you can find them on the People I Know Show YouTube channel, but always for photos of my guests and I, and photos of Jim and I and some of our travels, you can check out the People I Know Show Facebook or Instagram pages. And links to all that can be found in the show notes. Now, let's get into my conversation with Jim Ryan. Joining me today on People I Know Show is my good friend, Jim Ryan. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Curt.
Some people call you James, or maybe not that many people call you James, but I call you Jim. What's the ratio at this point in your life, do you think? Are you a Jim guy or a James guy?
Oh, I'm definitely a Jim guy.
Okay.
Definitely.
I've gotten to know you as Jim, and I've known you now 6.5 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if I've not known you, kind of known you, because before that, we had worked in the same place. I'd see you a little bit, but we didn't really start talking until my 30th birthday. And this story was told on episode 13 with Ron Johnson, the person that led me to this idea. But I went to 30 bars for my 30th birthday. And that was the first time I ever saw you outside of the workplace. And that day and many meetings after that led to really one of the best and I think more influential friendships of my life. Just the fact that we've lived different lives. We're from a different generation. And I guess that's why I want you on today, Jim, because you've been very influential in me redefining what a friend can be and who can be a friend.
Well, I'm really happy to be on your podcast, Curt, because you've been a very good friend. It was quite unusual, or quite an interesting situation where we ran into each other in the hallway before your birthday party, and you just spontaneously invited me to your birthday party, which I did not expect. I knew you because we worked together, but I was like, oh, wow, this is really exciting. Okay. Now, I didn't make 30 bars, of course. I don't know how many bars we made.
You made about 2 or 3, I think.
I think at least. We met at the Mall of America, and I made probably 7 or 8 of them.
Was it that many? Okay, good.
I think so.
I at that point in the day, I'd kind of lost track.
Yeah, I think so. But I actually remember that you were very influential in my life at that day, because it was the day that at the last bar at the mall, that people joined, my husband, my partner, Michael, joined me for dinner. And it was at that time that the people from our work were there. And I basically came out to them, which had been the first time I'd done that. And so it was a coming out party for me and a birthday party for you.
Yeah, I remember that day. I think we talked about this before, that we were just walking from one bar to the next, and I was like inquiring if you're dating someone. At that point, assuming that someone would be a woman. And then not longer after that, I met your husband. And at that point in my life, 6.5 years ago, I would receive information like that much differently now, because knowing you, because knowing Michael, because knowing other people I've met and gotten to know in that time. But at that point, it was kind of a shock, and I don't really know what to think of it. I didn't give it a lot of thought, probably. There was a lot going on that day, but I'd never met a gay married couple ever, and you guys are a little bit older than me, and the whole thing was very new to me.
And it was interesting because when you were asking me about if I had a girlfriend or if I was, and I kept dodging the question. And I'm saying, no, not really. Well, I didn't have a girlfriend. I wasn't lying.
And you still don't, unless something's developed recently.
And currently I do not. And that's the way it's going to stay, I guess. Huh?
Well, I think that sets up this aspect of the conversation pretty well, is not that you can really predict what happens in your own life, but you at this point are absolutely one of my best friends, and your husband, Michael, right up there as well. I see you a little bit more frequently, but you and I have traveled quite a bit together. And pretty much every time we traveled, Michael's been there too. So getting to know you guys and just recognizing that if at any point in my life I would have been hesitant to want to or be willing to be friends with a gay married couple that, wasn't from my generation, which I might have at some point thought that, why would I want to do that? I'm clearly wrong. And this podcast is so much about me looking back on my life and realizing where my thinking was wrong. So I guess the friendship started that day because that was the first time we hung out with each other. But I think something that really made it go is, okay, you were one of many people that showed up to that birthday. But then after that, we'd see each other again at our workplace occasionally, and you would mention, let's get together again or something. And we started to like just going out for a lunch or for a beer or something and just talking and getting to know each other. And, that's, I guess that shows sometimes one person needs to make at least a little bit extra effort and the other person needs to be willing to let the friendship begin. And I think both of us did our part to allow for that.
Well, I can remember after your birthday party inviting you to lunch. And it was really important to me to tell you how significant it was for me. I wanted you to know that it's basically coming out at your party and your acceptance of us and was very, very important. It was probably a turning point for me with my coworkers, because up to that point, I had been secretive about my sexuality. A couple people knew, but I was afraid to come out to everybody. Looking back, I think that was a mistake. I wish I had come out a lot sooner, because I'd been working there for almost 9 years and was living kind of a closeted life. So it really was significant for me. And that's how our friendship, I think, really developed.
It began that way. I think it is important. I'm learning more and more through the podcast, through other aspects of my life, to tell people how I feel and how they matter. And that's, at least occasionally in some of my conversations here, getting the opportunity to do that, to do it on a recording and then share that with others, I find pretty valuable. And your story and my story and how it connects, I think, is a valuable story to share. Let's talk about some of our travels, because I've found throughout life, whether it's someone I might be dating or in a relationship with, or friends in general, when you travel with people, you're with them a lot, constantly, and there's going to be some high pressure situations where you have to decide what to do, and that's you really get to know each other. And I think, fortunately for us, some of our early traveling time together was just in a car driving a distance. I remember one time 4 hours driving to Madison, Wisconsin, and another time was it 10 or 12 hours down to Springfield, Missouri, both times going to conferences, free thinker, atheist type of conferences. That is another part of our friendship, just kind of sharing an interest of going to these conferences. But really getting to know you and coming to like you, I think, happened in some of those car rides where we're forced to just talk to each other for hours, but the conversation always came so easily and still comes so easily with you.
Thank you. I feel the same way with you, Curt. If I can tell a quick story, I think the first car ride we had together was a short one, maybe for 45 minutes, and I remember you saying to me, I didn't know what we were going to talk about. And I think you had brought some tapes or something.
Yeah, I think I brought an audiobook or something I wanted to share with you.
And I kind of laughed, and I thought, yeah, I don't know what he was afraid of, but anyway, I did not have a problem talking with you, and you certainly didn't seem to have a problem talking with me. But that was one of our first experiences, and I still chuckle about it, because I didn't see it would be a problem. It wasn't a thing in my head. What are we going to talk about? It just kind of comes natural to me, I guess.
And I think because of you, it is. With some other person, any combination of people, some people might really struggle to pass that much time. But I think you find out who your best friends could be or could become based on how easy the conversation is. If the conversation is endlessly good and interesting, then I think you found a friend. Or I guess in my case, I realized that I'd found a friend and someone I didn't necessarily expect to become such a good friend. And it was through those conversations, I think. But those conversations and that time together in the car a few times, I think led to some of our other bigger adventures that we were on together. And I think we can share a little bit about that. One of the first big ones, I guess, is in my first episode with George, episode 1, we talked about a little bit about going to Oktoberfest. But you and Michael were 2 of the other people in this group of 6 that I was in that were at Oktoberfest in Germany a few years ago. And that was, one of these life experiences to be a part of such a big international event. And the fact that you and Michael were part of this group. And I feel like friendships are formed and bonded and made stronger again because of something like that. Is there a highlight or 2 that comes from that trip? I know that was probably our biggest adventure we'd ever been on.
Well, I think it was the most exciting and really, really memorable trips that I've ever had. First of all, just going to Oktoberfest and was something I had never thought about, going into Germany, especially where it started. I'd been to a few Oktoberfests here in the area, La Crosse, Wisconsin, but there's nothing like going to Munich to experience a real Oktoberfest. And going with my friends, with you and George and Jacob and myself and Michael and Kim. It was quite an experience. And I think basically we all got along pretty good. It's great having Curt along because he really knows how to navigate for us, because we would probably get lost or not know how to.
Jim, I think you should rephrase it and say, you would get lost. You have no problem getting lost.
Yeah, but I don't mind getting lost because I make friends.
You
easily.
do make friends when you get lost.
I make friends.
I'm pretty sure that happened one of those nights on that trip too. We thought we had lost you, and you were just busy making friends off somewhere. You didn't know where you were, but you're making friends.
Yeah, I was. We tend to probably try all of the beers that we can there, and the one day we were at Oktoberfest, we got split up after we left the tent, and my friend George and myself hung out together for a while, and then Curt joined us later. And on the way home, we were staying in different places, and I was staying with Michael at the first stop on the train, and you guys were at the second stop. So I got off, and I got lost and didn't know how to get back to the hotel.
Oh, that's right. You walked the wrong direction.
I
once
walked
you got
the
off the
wrong
train.
direction, and I walked into a bar. And this is probably 1 a.m. in the morning or something like that. And Michael was already back in the room wondering where the heck I was. And he ends up calling Curt, I believe.
He was quite concerned.
And what happened? Curt says, well, we let him off like an hour ago. And I don't know what happened to him.
That probably didn't help his concern.
No, he was panicking by that time. Well, I got off the train and it was late at night, and I didn't realize I had to walk under a bridge to get back to the hotel. But I stopped in the bar, and I got talking to some German people there, bought a beer for me, and didn't speak a lot of English, but we communicated, and the guy, one of the patrons there, took me outside and pointed me in the right direction, and I did make it back home. But part of the great adventure of our Munich trip, and from there we also went to Austria, and which was really interesting, and train rides. It was all a wonderful experience. That's all I can tell you. Eating together and seeing the sights. It was a great adventure, and one I'll never forget.
Since then, we've had a few other adventures. I think we'll talk about the one to your home, essentially. I traveled with Michael and you, it's coming up on a year ago, to Vancouver, and more specifically Victoria, British Columbia, which is where you were born, and I got to meet a bunch of your family from there, and as well as, and I think something that kind of maybe shows how close we've become is I was at the gravesite of your mother. As you travel, whenever you can get back there, you go there and you cleaned it up and shined it up as best you could. And I just witnessing you there, knowing that you hadn't been there in a while and there's no guarantee that you ever make it back there. That was just, it's something that I guess it's possible that I could do that with someone I'm not as close with, but I felt like it was very much right and okay that I was there with you that day, and I saw your childhood home and just things that, probably don't happen if we hadn't become so close.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think when you have a good friend, you want to share your memories with them, or you want to share the good times with them and share what your past was like. That was a trip that I was very, very happy to have gone on. I don't get back to Victoria very often, and my adopted mother is buried in Victoria. That was my home. I lived there until I was 11 years old before we moved to the States. But I was given up for adoption when I was born, and I made contact with my birth mother about 15 years ago, and she lived in Vancouver. So I discovered that I had 6 half-brothers and sisters that I didn't know I had. And so while we were on that trip, of course, we went to Vancouver, and I had a chance to introduce Curt to some of my family members. That we had a whole meal together, and I was just, they all liked him. He's very affable and friendly, and everybody really, we all fit in really well. And for me, that was a trip of a memorable trip together, and it just seemed so easy, when you travel with somebody. I think we get along really well traveling together. We don't think we have any issues.
We do, because after that, a short time, must have been 2 months later or so, we had another conference that we decided to go to in San Francisco last fall, and just a recent episode of People I Know show I had on Ellis. That was episode 39 with Ellis Howling, and she was one of the random people that became my friend at the hostel I was staying at, and then you and Michael got to meet her and spend the day with her while all of us travel up to the wine country there and Napa Valley and tried a couple wineries and just took in that site and that experience for the first time in our lives. As it's just another indication of how open-minded you guys are to meet the people that I began to gather throughout my life. And we had a great day that day. As over a few days, we did a few things, but I remember in that day in particular, I think we had a great time.
And that's the fun of going with you, Curt, because you always come up with adventures for us. You had the car you rented the car, you did the driving, we just sat back and relaxed and enjoyed the trip. And you always seem to find friends that are really nice people to know. And they kind of congregate around you, I guess, or you pick them, I guess. You have a good choice of friends. We did have a great time with Ellis and that day, and another guy that joined us.
James from Australia
came along. He was very affable. And so, yeah, that was a great trip. But without you, Curt, driving and navigating and coming up with the ideas, our trip wouldn't be quite as exciting. So that's something we really appreciate.
That's possible, and I'll take that as a compliment, so thank you. I think that gives us a good foundation sense of our friendship, and that's 6.5 years from the first time hanging out outside of our workplace to now. And it's constant progress, and just also a process of just having common interests and being able to just spend time together in different ways, and knowing that as much as anything, anyone, no matter where they come from, what their age is compared to your own, and anyone has an opportunity to be a friend if you just get to know them and realize that you have a few shared interests. That can go a long ways to a good friendship. And I think we have a number of shared interests. What I'd like to do now, Jim, if you're willing, is just the idea that you and I maybe we have all these things in common that lead to us to our friendship, but some of the things that I still don't have a great grasp of because I'm not you and I haven't lived your life is the progression of what your life has been like. You mentioned the being adopted, and you can get into that a little bit if you want, but also the fact that at some point you realized or understood that your sexuality wasn't in common with most of what was around you, and just navigating life like that is something that I don't know that I can quite comprehend as well as you'll be able to put into words.
Now, I'll try to put them into my own words. It's thinking back, it's quite a few years here. I have to think back what it was really like, because it's been a progression for me of coming out and to myself and to people around me. But I went to a Catholic seminary for 3 years of my life, and was wanting to be a priest, and I wanted to help people, and that was kind of my motivation there. It kind of formed my thinking for the rest of my life. I only lasted 3 years. I found out I had other interests and recommended that I continue my education. And so I graduated from St. John's University. And it was probably around that time that I maybe started coming out or realizing my sexuality a little more than I had in the past. But it, of course, couldn't be manifested at all when you're in college, especially a seminary, despite what some people might think. At least for me, it was in the closet.
Okay.
And after I graduated, I moved to the Twin Cities. And it was, I never talked about my sexuality, really. I used to go out and I'd meet people and my partners, but I never really discussed it in my workplace because I was always afraid that I might get fired, I wouldn't be accepted. And that's one of the issues that I've gradually come to terms with, that it's okay to be who I am. But it's been progressive. I never discussed it with my mother really for probably 10, 15 years, maybe 12, 15 years. It never came up, even though I used to take my boyfriends home. And she never figured it out or didn't want to accept it. I guess you see what you want to see. But it did come up maybe 15 years after I got out of college. And she was kind of surprised, but the issue with her was I happy? And that was her main concern, which I thought was really neat. And yes, I was happy. Because if you're yourself, you come out and you're living a life that's real, you are happy. And I was in relationships, so I was happy. But I wasn't out to everybody. And again, work was the main issue. Always afraid that maybe I would get fired. And there are, or even today, many states that you can get fired for being gay. People don't realize that. So we're very careful about that. However, as I've gotten older and different worked through my life, I've realized that today most people don't care. There was a time when people seemed to care about it, but today it seems, at least in my circle of work, people don't really care. They accept me and accept the situation as it is and live and let live, basically. So that's been a real progress for me and a real joy for me, actually. So anyway, as I say, today I've grown a lot, especially since 6.5 years when I really did come out to all my co-workers. And since then, it's basically I've been really out to anybody who cares to know about it or has an interest in me.
And you've been in a good relationship that turned into a marriage when it first could be legal somewhere. You first got married in, Toronto, I believe, and then legally again. Did you get married again in Minnesota, or you didn't really have to once it became legal in this state?
No, we got married 16 years ago in Toronto, Canada, as it was the first month of that Canada, the province of Ontario, allowed gay marriage. It wasn't through all Canada, but it was in the province of Ontario. And so Michael and I went up there and got married. We had been together 15 years at that point. From our first date, we have lived together. So I feel like we were married for 15 years anyway at that point, but I wanted to legalize it. And so on our anniversary date, June 30th, we got married in Toronto. So, and had a wonderful time there. And since then, I've had a wonderful life, and we get along wonderfully well, and we're very, very fortunate, and I'm feel blessed in many ways that I've had this relationship all these years.
Have you considered over the years either the best relationship advice that you've received, or something that you would be willing to offer for someone that hasn't been able to have a relationship maybe as strong as yours has been for 30 plus years?
I think the main thing is to respect the other person. It's really important. Try to accept them where they're at. I do that with Michael, and I'm sure he does that with me. We're never perfect people. We have our quirks. And I have mine, but we accept each other. And we never argue. We don't fight. We just talk things out. And I think that's one of the best advice I can give, is try to accept people where they're at. And other than that, we do have another piece of advice for couples. We keep our finances separate, because we think that money gets in the way of a lot of relationships. Mm-hmm. And for us, that's been a real benefit. We keep our finances separate. And so those are two pieces of advice would give couples.
Let's turn the conversation to another topic, because I think you've gotten into a couple quick stories from your life that, such as getting lost in Munich, Germany. It's kind of an indication of when I see new people around you, getting to know you and hearing your stories, that you come up with stories that are just really fascinating. So I'd like, if you could, for the purpose of this conversation, to draw from one of the stories from your life that you think talks about your adventures or maybe misadventures, and indicates just kind of the life that you've lived to this point.
Well, one of the joys of my life is travel and adventure. And that's probably the thing I have in common with Curt, because he loves traveling and adventure and new experiences. And that's been my life. I do a lot of traveling, and it's just, I enjoy it greatly. But one of my travels with a partner, a friend of mine, not Michael, but a former friend of mine, was to England. And we took the train one time, and we decided to see some of the countryside, and we stayed on the train not really knowing where we were going, and we went into Wales. And we stopped in a town called Mem. It's M-E-M. Never heard of it before, but it was dark. We thought, let's stop here and get a place to stay and see what it's like. So while we were there, it was still daylight. We went out to a local tavern and had a couple pints of beer, and we met some people there, some guys there that invited us to a party in the evening. And we said, well, I don't know, and I wasn't too keen on it, but my other partner was, so I said, okay. So they picked us up at our house where we were staying, like a B&B, picked us up in the evening in a big black limo, which I was a little hesitant to get into, especially at night in a strange city, in a strange country. And so, but we got in and we went for a ride, and it was way out in the country. We just kept driving and driving and driving, and I kept thinking to myself, where are we going? And what's happening? And I'm seeing these fields and thinking, oh my God. So anyway, I don't remember the town we went to, but we went to this next town, and when we got there, fortunately, we didn't stop along the way. There was a party up in like American Legion Hall, a type of thing, upstairs. And so we went to this party upstairs, and these guys that were with us kept priming us with drinks and wanting us to get drunk. And we were suspicious of that. I was even more suspicious when I walked around and saw a pentagon on the floor, on the floor of this building where we at. And I realized that we were in some kind of a coven. And I thought, oh, Lordy, we're in trouble. So my partner and I decided that we would sneak out different doors and get the heck out of there, which we did. And we got down. Well, now we're late at night. We don't have a way back to Mem. And we called the cops, and they said to us, I hope you weren't at this party that they're having over at such and such a place. You gotta be careful of that. And we said, oh yeah, we were there. And the cop warned us, and yeah, well, you're a good thing you got out of there. So we were really thankful to get out of there. We ended up getting a cab and getting a ride back to Mem. And I have done a little bit of research since then, and I realized there actually is a coven in Mem or in that area. So we really probably were in a situation that could have been pretty dangerous, I think.
So worst case scenario, what would have happened to you that night?
Well, we don't know for sure whether they were going to get us drunk, and if they were going to make a sacrifice out of us. We were. That was the thing that was in the back of my mind, because there were plenty of people there that could have grabbed us, and I often wonder what the whole situation was. But it was a big concerted effort to get us drunk, and there was no doubt about it, and it was very scary. But probably the most frightening experience of my life.
What did you learn from that experience, Jim?
Oh boy, not much. Good question. I still travel. I still like adventure, but I don't think I would ever go to a party at night with people I don't know. I mean, I just would never do that again. That's for sure.
Even though there was two of you, it's still not safe enough, apparently, in that case.
Not when there's a whole bunch of people besides the two of us. But that was one of my adventures. I've had others, but that's the most frightening one I've had.
I think we can leave the adventures stop there for now for this conversation, unless there's something you really want to talk about, and move into the personal growth segment. I know recently as we're sitting here in your home right now, and I stop here occasionally when I can. And for a while, I was stopping here fairly regularly because you weren't in position to leave here all that often, because about 6 months ago, give or take, you slipped and fell on the ice, and that's led to all kinds of difficulties for you coming back from that injury. I don't know if you need to get into all the details of everything that happened. That's up to you. But I'm thinking for the personal growth segment, I'd imagine you've had some time here healing, getting better, and you're still not where you were. That you've had some time to think about your life, about your mortality, about something, about now that getting around is more difficult than it's ever been, probably. Like, what have you learned about yourself?
Well, I've been very fortunate to be in good health for all of my many years. I have rarely been sick, which until I had the fall in January on the ice and tore my quadricep tendon on my left leg, I had really never had an accident that caused me more than a day or two of discomfort. And after the fall, I was supposed to have the surgery, and my knee was swollen and infected. And I went to the hospital, and while there, found out I had diverticulitis. So I was immediately put in the hospital for 2 weeks. And during that time, they found out that they were trying to cure the diverticulitis with drugs and intravenous feeding, and they had me poked with all kinds of needles. And it was a very discomforting situation. Finally, I did have the surgery that I needed, and had 20% of my colon taken out. So it was rather scary at that point, being in the hospital. It reminded me of how as we get older, we're more vulnerable to being sick. And I got out of the hospital, and I did have finally have my ligament reattached, and which has caused some issues because it was a time lapse there, and so I've had problems getting my legs working properly, or my left leg working the way it should. It's been an extended period of rehabilitation, physical therapy and such. And not being able to drive, I've been home most of the time alone and have time to think about mortality, and I'm not afraid of it. I jokingly say we're all going to die, but I like to make some stops along the way, and that's what I'm doing in my life. But I'm not afraid of death, but I'm more afraid of not being well, of not being healthy. That's more afraid. That's a lot scarier. What I've really learned, I think, is that I have to depend on other people. I've been a pretty independent person all my life. I've never had to depend on anybody. But, when you can't dress yourself, you can't put your socks on, you can't can't do almost anything without help. Unfortunately, Michael's been a incredible aid through this difficult time for me. I realize that we really are dependent on other people a lot more than we probably realize. And I guess that's okay, because a lot of people have come forward and said, can we help you? Can we give you rides? I know Kurt's offered to give me rides if I needed it.
You still haven't taken me up on that, Jim.
Well, and I would if I absolutely needed to, but fortunately, Michael's been there, and I haven't had to use your help. But if I need it, I will. But it's nice to have somebody caring for you and caring enough to make offers to help you. And that means a lot to me. What I've learned is to enjoy every day that we have. I don't want to say as if it's your last day, but you need to enjoy life and every day. And I try to do that now. And I appreciate every day that I have with my friends. And I guess that's what I've learned. That's the lesson I've learned, that you have to enjoy every day the best way you can, and with your friends and the people that are important to you in your life.
Something that I think we share, Jim, maybe in different ways slightly, but you'd mentioned previously to me that you're a procrastinator. I have been too historically. Do you find that what you've dealt with lately has alleviated any of your procrastination, or do you feel like you're still the same procrastinator you once were?
Well, if I have one flaw, and I may have probably more than one, that's the biggest one, is procrastination. I don't really understand why, but I've always been that way. I will always leave the studying in college in the last day or two, for big tests, and anything unpleasant that I don't want to handle, I leave it till the end or hope that it goes away. And some of the issues do go away, but others never do. And it is something I need to. I'm kind of trying to work on. But,
kind of trying to work on. I don't think you're going to make a lot of progress with that kind of language. Kind of trying to.
Yeah, I know. I haven't made a full commitment to it. One of the issues that happened to me, though, was that I had a phone call from a very close friend of mine about a year ago. He had moved out of state and was on dialysis because of his AIDS that he had. And we had been very good friends here in the cities, and he moved back home to Texas. And I had a phone call on my recorder here that he called and said, please call me. And then he called a second time, a few days later. And I kind of procrastinated and said, well, I'll get back to him, and no hurry. Third call I got was from his sister, who said that Abel had died. Apparently, he was calling me to tell me he was going off dialysis and he wanted to say goodbye. And that kind of shook me, because I really feel sad that I didn't really return that call. And from now on, I'm trying to be better to return people's calls and letters and so forth, because you never know in life. And that was a case that I feel badly about it. I wish he had left a fuller message, but needless to say, it was a wake-up call to not to procrastinate as much as I do.
That is well, thank you for sharing that story. That's a lesson, obviously, that you had to learn the hard way, but hopefully you sharing it can help me and anybody else. Is to think about the ways that you've done well or maybe made an impact in your life, or what you hope your life has been. Whenever the day comes when you're not here anymore, what would you hope people have thought of you or will think of you or remember you by?
Well, that's one of the things I think about now as I've been ill and at home here. I've thought a lot about that. What will people think about me when I'm gone? And I hope really that the thoughts are positive. I hope I've made a positive influence on people's lives. I hope I've helped people. I've always tried to support people and be positive with them, and I hope when I'm gone that they'll remember me favorably for that. I've tried to. One of the accomplished things that I'm very proud of is I've kind of brought people into my life that were probably out there that nobody else would have brought into their lives for different reasons. So I feel happy about that. I'm proud of myself about that. But anyway, overall, I just hope I've had a positive influence on people's lives. Because when you're gone, the only thing left really are memories. That's really your legacy. And I'm hoping that they're all positive memories of my life.
Well, at least with me, Jim, the positive versus the negative far outweighs on the positive side. I'm not sure I can even think of many negative ones if I really tried that hard. So at least with me, you've done well with that.
Thank you, Curt. It makes me happy to hear that.
If you're ready, let's go then to the being wrong segment. And I'm not sure how you feel about the wording of this segment, but ultimately the point of it is to share a story from your life, something that you've learned in your life that if you could go back in time, of course we can't go back in time and things happen how they did, but if you could tell the former version of yourself or have this message resonate possibly with someone else so that they do something in a more effective way than they're doing now, than you might have done for yourself, what would it be? What can you suggest that perhaps you were wrong about?
Well, I think that being afraid of not being liked is one of the things that we struggle with, all of us, at least I do. And one of the big issue there, of course, was sharing with people who I really am. And I think if I could go back in time, I would have come out to more people at my work and around me. And I've learned as I've gotten older that's really not all that, what other people think of you really doesn't, you can't control that. What you have to do is be authentic to yourself and to the people that you're with. And that's the lesson I think I've learned as I've gotten older, that I wish I had been more out to people and been more authentic to the people around me.
Had you been able to do that, if you were, of course we can't until the time machine shows up, and who knows, maybe it will soon. If you were able to go back, what do you think might have changed in your life earlier that would have been pretty important to you now?
I think I would have had fuller friendships with people. I think a lot of people I liked that worked with that could have been friends, could have been in my life. I never had the chance to let them in my life. And so I wasn't in theirs and they weren't in mine. And I think that's what I missed. I missed a lot of friendships and sharing of people's lives with them. And they missed my life, sharing in my life, I think. And so I think that's the issue that I miss the most. I'm not thinking of one instant particularly. I'm just thinking more in general of the work environments that I was in. I can think of one example where it influenced my relationship. A good friend of mine's that I worked with, wife died, and I had not come out to the man when I went to his funeral, or to his wife's funeral at the synagogue. And what I'm really ashamed to say is that Michael was with me in the car, and I asked him to stay in the car. I didn't want him to come in because I didn't want to show that I was partnered up with anybody. And it hurt him greatly, and I feel bad about it. And I know later on, if I had come out, this person had no problem with being gay at all. He embraced me, but it took a few years for me to be real with him and authentic with this man and people I worked with. So that's a lesson that I learned and wish I had done differently.
So it sounds like you thought there'd be this important protective barrier between you and the world by not sharing some of the time or most of the time. But as it turns out, the barrier that you had there was better off not being there in the first place.
It was fear of rejection is basically what it's all about, really. In some cases, fear of being fired, but fear of rejection. And I guess sometimes I would have been rejected for who I am, but I think many times it wouldn't have mattered, and it might have made for better friendships. And so I regret that I didn't, like I say, I regret that I wasn't more out over the years.
And I guess as we wrap this up, looking back to our friendship, if you weren't open with me that night of my 30th birthday, then maybe you wouldn't have been as compelled as you were to talk with me again and thank me for like allowing that opportunity. And if that doesn't happen, this friendship never takes off, quite possibly. So you being open allowed to you wanting to tell me how grateful you were for being open. And then, here we are 6.5 years later, sharing our story to an audience that hopefully can take something from it as well.
I think you're absolutely right. Our friendship would never have come to this. We never would have had this friendship if I hadn't been open and come out. And this has meant a lot to me and to Michael. You've been a great influence in our life, and we're really, I know that you're out there really working hard to share your knowledge with people, try to help people. And I think that's a real inspiration for me. And I really appreciate your friendship and the good times we've had. And seeing you is an inspiration for me to be a better person also.
Well, I appreciate that, Jim. And I appreciate you sharing aspects of your life with me today and with the People I Know show audience. And I can only hope that in some way, even though it's people, not everyone listening was going to know you, that they do know you in a way that can leave a positive impact on their life moving forward, because you certainly have on mine. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Curt. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to People I Know Show. As always, links are in the show notes for the People I Know Show Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. Please go there, check out whichever one or all of them, subscribe or follow whatever link option they give you. Make sure if you're not subscribing to the podcast on your favorite app, please do that. If you're not sure of which app to download, I have a link to that also in the show notes to give you some quick options depending on what type of device you're using. Take a moment to comment or review the show on Apple Podcasts or any of those other social media sites. And as always, I'd be happy to receive an email from you. Send it to me, Curt Carstensen, using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.